Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back in time to a place where office work was first invented. Not in a fluorescent-lit cubicle, but under the scorching sun of ancient Sumer. You're not wearing a necktie, you're draped in linen. Your laptop is a hunk of damp clay. And your mouse, that's a goat trying to eat your paperwork. The city of buzzes around you, not with Wi-Fi signals, but with bleeding animals, merchant calls, and the clacking of reed styluses scratching out. Cuneiform on clay. You dodge a donkey cart stacked high with fish, sidestep a puddle that may or may not be sacred, and finally find yourself at the gates of the ziggurat, your new office. You're here to do the job of a temple bureaucrat. The economy, the calendar, the taxes, even the beer. Everything must be accounted for. And lucky you, they've just invented the concept of administration. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love seeing how far this little sleepy channel reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle into at sunrise when the mud brick walls are just beginning to glow golden and the scent of roasting barley hangs in the air. You're still half asleep, to be honest. Your sandals squelch through the still damp road, and the early rising goats are already hollering like unpaid interns. Is dense, stacked, smells like onions and ambition. The ziggurat, the big step pyramid that dominates the skyline, is your new workplace. More than a temple, it's the beating, bureaucratic heart of this civilization. Everything from storing surplus grain to tracking laborers on canal projects happens here. You don't get a cubicle. You get a stool in a corner near the barley vault. And your inbox? Literally a box. With actual clay tablets. Incoming. There's no receptionist. Instead, an apprentice scribe thrusts a slate into your hands, mutters something about 3 goats gone missing, and rushes off to chase what might be a tax-delinquent farmer. You squint at the symbols, triangular dents in neat little rows. They still look like chicken scratches to you, because you're new. The office is already humming. Well, more like clunking. People are pounding clay into shape, etching it with sharp reeds and mumbling about quotas. Someone's grinding pigments. In a corner, maybe for temple murals, maybe just to kill time. It's hard to tell. You're part of a new professional class, the scribal class, literate, elite, paid in beer and bread. Your job is to help organize the chaos of early civilization. And believe me, there's a lot of chaos to go around. Historians still argue whether the invention of writing in Mesopotamia was meant primarily for storytelling or for bean counting. Spoiler, it's mostly beans, or more precisely, barley. Lots and lots of barley. You start your shift by reviewing the day's tasks, feed counts, ration logs, a mysterious entry labeled Goat Inventory, Urgent. You don't ask questions. You just press your stylus into clay and try not to mess up the alignment. Because one misplaced wedge can turn 5 sheep into 55 sheep. And suddenly you've got a priest waving entrails in your face. At some point mid-morning, someone drops a broken tablet near your foot. They swear under their breath, something about a scribe from Lagash messing up again, and stomp off to fetch more clay. You realize that office drama is not a modern invention. It's just gone from papyrus to Slack. Despite the lack of windows, air conditioning, or ergonomic chairs, the room has a rhythm. Scratch, squish, clack. The sound of civilization becoming legible. You begin to get into the flow. Numbers, symbols, scribbles that start to make sense. You're tracking temple livestock today, and it's weirdly calming, like doing taxes while slightly tipsy. You even start to hum, a little barley beer chant someone was humming outside the temple gates earlier. You notice the older scribes don't just copy, they improvise. They add little flourishes. One guy signs his work with a tiny doodle of a sheep. Another uses a weird shorthand only he seems to understand. There's no standardization yet. It's the Wild West of data entry. Quirky fact? One of the earliest known love poems comes from this region, etched in cuneiform, praising someone's thighs like plump dates. You make a mental note never to let that kind of tablet fall into your clay inbox. By noon, your back is sore, your eyes hurt, and you'd trade your stylus for a nap. But you've logged 3 bags of onions, 15 amphorae of beer, and, thanks to a generous rounding error, 42 chickens that probably don't exist. Welcome to your new career. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it's possibly the very beginning of everything we now call the modern world. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You've made it past your first day. Barely. Your wrist is sore, your knees feel like sun-baked mud brick, and there's still dried clay under your fingernails. But the head scribe didn't fire you, the high priest didn't curse you, and no, one's threatened you with a sheep liver reading, so we're going to call that a win. Today, as the early light turns the mud brick alleys of into a glowing labyrinth of dust and incense smoke, you shuffle your way back to the temple compound. You're slightly more confident now. You've memorized the turns through the fish market. You've learned which street goose to avoid. You even brought your own stylus this time, lovingly sharpened over a breakfast of lentils and yesterday's bread crust. Soggy, but nostalgic. At the entrance, the temple's senior scribe, whose beard is so heavily oiled it glistens like a blessed scroll, gives you a once-over and grunts something halfway between approval and indigestion. He waves you toward the same little stool in the record's alcove. The spot smells like warm clay, old sandals, and something faintly resembling burnt onion. You plop down and get started. Today's docket? Inventory reconciliation. Sounds dull, and it is. But in Sumer, it's sacred dullness. You're comparing 3 tablets, one from the temple granary, one from the sacrificial records, and one that simply reads, "Goats, urgent," in what you can only describe as angry wedges. Your eyes dart across cuneiform rows, carefully pressed wedge marks in columns that almost look like tiny mountains. It's mesmerizing, almost meditative, somewhere between Sudoku and stone carving. You're beginning to appreciate the subtle artistry of early administration. Some of these tablets even have little margin doodles. One scribe signs his name with a sheep. Another symbol is possibly a bird, or maybe it's just what happens when you press your stylus while sneezing. Now, historians still argue whether these temple bureaucrats were actual priests, glorified bookkeepers, or something in between. But one thing's for sure. They knew how to track a barley loan down to the last bushel. Your job is less about storytelling and more about accountability. One false symbol, and suddenly 40 sheep become 400, and someone's waking up with a serious God problem. The morning hums along. Scribes murmur, styluses scratch, and somewhere nearby, a goat bleats like it knows it's been misfiled. You're deep into tallying duck donations when it happens. A pause. A long silence. Someone clears their throat. Then slowly the room begins to shift, break time. It's not formalized. There's no bell, no schedule, but everyone just knows. One by one, scribes push away from their benches, stretch limbs, crack knuckles. An apprentice appears with a jug, thick ceramic, dripping with condensation. Someone else carries a tray of figs and roasted chickpeas, and suddenly, you're swept up in a quiet exodus toward the courtyard. You step into dappled shade beneath, palm fronds. The air outside smells less like sweat and more like date syrup. A communal bench hosts a tangle of limbs, fabrics, and overheard complaints. You settle next to a guy you've only seen nodding to himself all morning. He offers you a fig with a conspiratorial grin and says, "Sumerian accounting wine pairs best with passive-aggressive omens." There's no coffee in sight, of course. This is 2400 BCE. But the vibe? Oh, it's unmistakable. This is the ancient world's first coffee break. You sip cautiously from the jug. The liquid is cool, sweet, faintly fermented, and definitely communal. You decide not to think too hard about whose lips touched it before yours. It's oddly refreshing, though. A touch of date, a hint of fig, and a whole lot of aftertaste. The conversation drifts from barley taxes to dream omens. Someone boasts about interpreting their neighbor's vision of a fish with legs. Another rolls his eyes and says it's clearly about irrigation quotas. You just chew your chickpeas and let the ancient gossip wash over you. Here's a quirky tidbit for your break. Archaeologists once uncovered what may be the world's first cafeteria log, tablets used to track food rations for workers. Imagine your name written in clay next to your daily bread allotment. Now imagine being deducted 2 onions because you showed up late. Bureaucracy finds a way. As you stretch out your legs in the shade, you notice a small clay tag tied with string hanging off one scribe's robe. It reads something like, Authorized Grain Handler, Level 2. Is it an early ID badge, a divine clearance tag, or just a fancy way of saying, don't eat the sacrificial wheat? Historians are still debating that one. The break lasts, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30. Time moves oddly in the heat. But you feel the shift again, the quiet sigh of acceptance. Clay waits. Goats need counting. You shuffle back inside with the others, a little less stiff, a little more sticky from the date wine. Back in your corner, the goat tablet looms. The angry wedge marks seem less judgmental now. You pick up your stylus and crack your knuckles. 1 goat, 2 goats, 3 goats. Somehow this really is better than farming. By now, your stylus feels like a natural extension of your hand, a little wooden wand for conjuring order from chaos. Clay no longer seems intimidating, just stubborn, especially when it dries too fast and your coworker accidentally coughs mid-etch, leaving a forever recorded yay in a temple ledger about lentil distribution. Today, you've been assigned something truly prestigious, the Master Grain Tally. This isn't just counting jars. This is the record for temple grain stores, reviewed by priests, priests' assistants, possibly priests' goats, and definitely the gods, at least according to your supervisor. It's your first time using the big tablet. Not actually larger in size, but sacred in context. You sit up a little straighter, adjust your robe, wipe your hands on your thigh, then you realize your thigh is covered in yesterday's scribbles, again. You press the first wedge carefully. This one means barley. The next is 10. Then another for jar. The rhythm settles in. It's almost musical. And you begin to understand why this writing system caught on. It's weirdly satisfying. Like popping bubble wrap, but for divinely mandated inventory. Historians still argue whether cuneiform was invented by the Sumerians or adopted from a neighboring proto-writing system. Either way, by the time you're working, it's already everywhere. Temple walls, legal contracts, shipping manifests, even the occasional breakup note. One tablet found was a terse line of wedges roughly translating to, take your sheep and go. You pause mid-tally when a minor priest marches in, holding what looks like a recently exercised chicken. He squints at your tablet, mumbles something about last week's barley miscounts, and then dumps a fresh log onto your lap. It's the beer report. Not the kind you drink, but the kind that measures what everyone else drank. You glance at the figures. Someone apparently consumed 27 amphorae in one afternoon. You assume it's either a typo or an incredibly tragic wedding. You're about to cross-check the entries when you hear it. A subtle groan from the next table over. The intern. He's on his 3rd try at the fish tax tablet and just dropped it, face down, on the floor. There's a moment of silence as everyone stares at the clay slab now decorated with a perfect imprint of his foot. Nobody says anything, but one scribe picks up his stylus and draws a small fish with wings on the edge of his own tablet. A tiny act of rebellion, or solidarity. This is your quirky tidbit for the day. In a few surviving tablets, scholars have spotted tiny doodles, casual drawings tucked into the margins. cats chasing birds, priests with exaggerated noses, even one that might depict a stylus duel between scribes. Imagine slipping a cartoon into your monthly budget report. Timeless humor. As the morning wears on, the temple office grows hotter. You roll your shoulders, stretch your fingers, and lean back just far enough to spot the head scribe nodding off behind a curtain. His beard twitches as he snores, possibly dreaming of decimal points and divine vengeance. Lunch arrives not with fanfare, but with the faint tinkling of a bell, carried by a temple attendant bearing a tray of lentils, flatbread, and what you sincerely hope is goat yogurt. You eat at your post, carefully using your stylus-holding hand for bread and your less dominant hand for yogurt. You've learned. Clay and dairy do not mix. There's a quiet moment as everyone eats. The clatter dies down. A few scribes trade. Bites, one offers you a pickled onion with a sly grin, and you suddenly realize this is the original open office. No walls, no privacy. Just you, your co-workers, and a sacred mandate to count every single grain. You check your numbers. Again. Add a wedge. Cross out another. Then you stop. Someone's numbers are off. Not yours. No, your barley math is impeccable. But the beer tally you just received doesn't match the amphora delivery log. You flip through yesterday's records. Check the stylus marks. Count again. Still off. By 5 full jars, you look up. The intern is watching you. He gives a slow, panicked blink. You blink back. Silent communication. He's messed up. You've found it. The question now is, do you fix it or let him sweat? You opt for mercy. You adjust the number discreetly. Press a correction wedge that could plausibly mean accidental overpouring during libation. You even add a smiley triangle in the margin. The intern exhales like a deflated goatskin. Crisis averted. This, it seems, is your life now. Not heroic epics, not warfare, but the small, soothing victories of accurate barley math and anonymous tablet edits. As the sun leans west, the air thickens with heat and the distant sound of flutes. Someone has started humming again. The same barley song from 2 days ago. You hum along, stylus in hand, as your wedge marks march neatly across the clay. And for a brief, drowsy moment, you realize, this is kinda nice. Midweek arrives in like a slow-moving ox cart. Predictable, dusty, and somehow heavier than you'd expect. You wake to the sound of neighbors arguing over fish prices and a rooster that definitely doesn't belong to anyone on your street. The sun hasn't even cleared the ziggurat yet, but your day has already begun. Today, you're assigned a fresh and thrilling task, checking clay receipts against temple distribution logs. In modern terms, you're reconciling invoices. The Sumerian dream. The first scroll, tablet, on your bench is from a brickmaker. He claims to have delivered 60 bricks to the temple courtyard, but the courtyard inventory says 56. You sigh, scratch your head, and wonder if 4 bricks spontaneously walked away. Or maybe someone's building a secret shrine behind the goat. Pen again, you send a junior scribe to investigate. They return an hour later covered in straw, holding 3 bricks, and muttering something about a sleeping priest using the 4th as a pillow. You adjust the number and make a note for the next day's report. 1 brick unaccounted for, presumed sacred. But the work is not all clerical. You're summoned mid-morning to a council of allocation, which is just a fancy term, for meeting where everyone argues about barley. You're ushered into a hall lined with stone benches and people who look like they haven't blinked since breakfast. The elders are already in full debate. One argues that the canal workers should receive 2 jars of beer a day. Another insists on 3. A priest interrupts to suggest barley beer should be mixed with date juice on fasting days. A third man, possibly asleep with his eyes open, occasionally mumbles, yes, at the wrong moments. Meetings in ancient Sumer don't operate with agendas or time limits. They operate on something far less predictable, omens. The longer it takes, To reach consensus, the more likely someone will send for a diviner to read animal entrails to break the tie. Historians still argue whether these council decisions were genuinely democratic or just thinly veiled power plays. Judging by today's proceedings, the answer seems to be power plays, with a side of goat-themed metaphors. You are asked to read the temple's surplus log aloud. You stand, try to ignore the prickling heat under your robe, and chant the numbers in what you hope is a respectable bureaucratic tone. 17 amphorae barley, 8 sealed jars of fig paste, 42 standard loaves. Someone clears their throat. You pause. Look up. It's your supervisor, gesturing wildly from behind a curtain. You've made a typo, not 42. 4.2. You try to recover, but it's too late. A red-faced elder leaps up, accuses your records of falsifying temple offerings, and demands a new audit. Somewhere outside, a goat sneezes in agreement. Eventually, after 2 hours, 3 threats of retribution from Enlil, and 1 emergency snack break, featuring chickpea paste and bread harder than clay, the council disbands. Nothing has been decided, except that someone should look into the fig paste shortages and that the gods probably want more ducks. Back at your post, you scribble a quick memo. Next meeting, bring own stylus, courage, and perhaps an emergency duck. Now here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some surviving Sumerian tablets are actually meeting notes, complete with accusations, passive-aggressive counters, and summaries that usually end with phrases like, agreed for now, or to be decided by omen. If you've ever sat through a 3-hour board meeting that ended with, let's circle back, congratulations, you've shared a moment with your bureaucratic ancestors. As the day winds down, you shuffle through the last of your receipts. Fish deliveries, barley rations, 1 extremely suspicious line item reading, guest gift, 1 exotic lizard. You don't ask. There's a calm that settles in around late afternoon. The stylus is slow. The light softens. A pigeon lands on the window ledge and immediately regrets it. The intern next to you yawns so hard his eyes water. You offer him a date, and he nods like you've saved his life. You press 1 last wedge into the clay. Carefully, quietly. Then you stack the tablets and tuck them into the fireproof archive niche. Yes, the archive is literally a furnace. Clay. Tablets harden beautifully when baked, ensuring their contents will last for millennia. Until, of course, someone digs them up and wonders why fig paste audit was worth immortalizing. You gather your things. Clay dust, stylus, the remains of your lentil lunch. You give the intern a pat on the shoulder. He's still muttering. About beer rations. You step outside just as the sun kisses the edge of the ziggurat. The sky is copper. The air smells faintly of dust, incense, and cooked onions. You made it through another day of history's first office job. Barely. And as you trudge home past bleeding sheep and vendors hawking pickled garlic, you wonder, not for the first time, how many ancient tablets it would take to properly document your commute. There's something oddly comforting about routine, even when that routine involves starting your day ankle-deep in muddy alleyways while dodging a loose donkey. You've learned to leave home early, not just to beat the temple crowd, but to avoid the morning rush of fishmongers and cartwheels. Today, as you settle onto your clay-dusted bench at the temple records office, you're given a special assignment: assist in correspondence. That's right. You're now on intercity clay mail duty. Not glamorous, but at least you won't be tallying goat droppings again. The head scribe drops a stack of outgoing tablets onto your bench. Each is wrapped in a thin clay envelope. Yes, that's a thing, with the recipient's name and city etched onto the outer shell. If someone tries to tamper with it, they'll break the envelope and leave a visible crack. Early anti-hacking technology. Kind of genius. Your job is to make fresh copies of important messages before they're sent. Off with a caravan. That means deciphering someone else's stylus scrawl and duplicating it as perfectly as possible. You squint at a line that appears to read, "Shipment of lentils approved by moon sign. Delay possible due to crocodile." You pause, glance at your supervisor. He shrugs. Sounds about right. Historians still debate the exact nature of Sumerian intercity diplomacy. How much was ceremonial versus practical? But we do know that Sumer had a thriving culture of correspondence. Letters between cities like Uruk, Lagash, and Eridu weren't just for logistics. They were sometimes glorified ego battles between elites. My ziggurat is taller than your ziggurat. That sort of thing. You finish your first copy, seal it, with your personal wedge signature, a humble triangle with a slightly curved bottom, and place it in the outgoing pile. A courier will carry it by foot, donkey, or boat. It may take days to reach its destination, depending on floods, bandits, or goat-related delays. Meanwhile, your coworker leans over with a grin. Want to see something fun? He pulls out a tablet from a hidden drawer, definitely not temple-approved, and shows you what appears to be a clay parody. It mimics an official letter but is filled with jokes about the high priest's love of pickled onions and the royal scribe's suspicious relationship with a chicken. This is your quirky tidbit for today. Ancient humor existed. Clay tablet puns. Sarcastic marginal notes. Even entire mock letters meant to poke fun at the pomp of officialdom. Bureaucrats, it turns out, have always found creative ways to complain. As midday approaches, the temple goes oddly quiet. A solar omen is due, a moment when the priests will consult the position of the sun and shadows to determine if any rituals need adjusting. No one dares make too much noise. Even the goats seem to get the memo. You take the moment to stretch. Your back cracks like fired pottery. You flex your fingers, now permanently shaped like styluses. Outside, the scent of roasting onions and beer mash drifts in. Somewhere, a flute begins to play what you've now dubbed the barley shuffle. Then comes the real test of your day, translating a letter written by a visiting scribe from Akkad. The dialect is familiar but slippery, like trying to read a menu in your second-best language while sleep-deprived. You manage to decipher most of it. Something about a delayed shipment of copper, and a very strongly worded complaint about spoiled onions. You carefully rewrite the message in standard Sumerian script, simplifying a few of the saltier expressions. Instead of, your storage pots are an offense to the gods, you write, the quality of vessels has caused divine concern. It's all about spin. As the afternoon wears on, the pace slows. You share a jug of date water with the intern, who's currently inventing new ways to accidentally spill inkless ink. You watch a fly dance across a tablet. You briefly consider inventing an early version of a paperweight, then remember that clay weighs several pounds and sits just fine. Eventually, your supervisor drops by and nods at your copies. Not bad. You only confused barley with married once. You glance down at the rejected tablet. Yep. Somewhere out there, a city is receiving a message that says 3 married jars will arrive next moon. You sigh, but your supervisor pats you on the shoulder. They'll figure it out, or marry the jars. Who knows? You wrap up the last few messages, organize the copies, and prepare the pile for delivery. A courier arrives, sweaty and barefoot, with a sack slung across his back. He nods, loads the tablets, and disappears down the road, blending into the city's slow-motion chaos. By now, the sky's turning pink. The ziggurat casts long shadows over the courtyard. You gather your things, stylus, spare date, folded linen scrap, and step outside just in time to see a vendor selling roasted fish on a stick, a surprisingly modern idea. You walk home at a thoughtful pace, replaying the strange logic of today's correspondence. Lentils, copper, angry chickens. Intercity diplomacy powered by foot couriers and prayers. You pass a neighbor chiseling something onto a wall, probably a love note, or a recipe, or a complaint. You wonder if someday someone else will decode today's letters and laugh at the way you misspelled onion. Let them. It's a new morning, and the city of is already awake before you are. You stir from sleep to the usual Sumerian alarm clock, a chorus of bleating goats, hawking vendors, and that one rooster with no regard for time. You stretch, Rinse your face with yesterday's slightly questionable well water and slip into your linen robe. It's a little stiff, thanks to a rushed laundry job involving sand and a prayer, but it'll do. Today's assignment arrives before breakfast. You've been summoned to assist a senior scribe, an elder so respected his beard is braided in 3 distinct directions and held together with what appears to be beeswax. He doesn't say much, just hands you a heavy clay logbook and gestures toward the temple's outer court. You follow, shuffling along dusty corridors until you arrive at what you can only describe as Sumer's answer to HR. The office is a covered portico with low benches, a central table, and several smaller clay bins labeled, rather optimistically, with pictographs for complaints, discipline, and transfer requests. You now understand why the intern was weeping near the pigeon coop yesterday. The elder scribe grunts and gestures for you to sit. Then he proceeds to read aloud from a complaint tablet filed by a fishmonger named Enkidu, who claims a temple courier borrowed his donkey and returned it hairless. You stifle a laugh. The elder does not. You're tasked with recording Enkidu's statement onto a fresh slab, this time using the official tone, a more formal set of symbols that emphasize neutrality, respect, and occasionally, divinely, sanctioned sarcasm. Donkey was returned without tail, you read, transcribing slowly. Owner believes this constitutes disrespect to both animal and temple. The elder nods solemnly and adds, suggest reparation, 1 amphora of fish, tail optional. Historians still argue whether these early complaint systems were genuinely fair or mostly for show, but some of the surviving tablets suggest a surprising degree of attention to detail. One complaint about stolen grain includes a drawing of the suspect's footprint. Another references a witness who heard the thief sneeze near the beer storehouse. Your next case involves a dispute over sacred courtyard sweeping duties. 2 acolytes are both refusing to sweep near the incense altar, claiming the other left soot ghosts behind. You help the elder compose a reply that reads like divine wisdom, but basically means both of you sweep it. By late morning, you've written 6 responses, 2 internal memos, and 1 extremely passive-aggressive note to the goat yard supervisor. You're halfway through reviewing a transfer request. Some poor soul wants to be reassigned from barley, rationing to anything that involves fewer angry farmers, when a group of junior scribes bursts in, breathless. They're carrying what looks like a scorched tablet. One explains, the record room's hearth flared up. We lost 5 logs. But we saved the barley audit. Everyone cheers. You're pretty sure that's sarcasm. Here's your quirky tidbit for the day. While fire destroyed many ancient records, it also preserved others. Clay tablets, once baked hard in kilns or accidentally in fires, often became more durable. Some of the best preserved Sumerian archives exist today, because the building they were stored in burned down. After the brief excitement, things calm. The elder brings out lunch, flatbread, pickled leeks, and a shared jug of cloudy fig beer. You eat in silence, watching a bird try and fail to land gracefully on a bronze incense stand. The elder scribe watches too, then mutters, reminds me of the high priest during last year's eclipse. You nearly choke on your leeks. After lunch, you assist with a formal decree, an order to reassign laborers to the East Canal. The clay is particularly stubborn this afternoon, and the stylus sticks on the final wedge. The elder frowns, reheats the slab by a nearby brazier, and tries again. The result is uneven, but legible. He shrugs. The gods won't mind. They don't read fine print. You finish your afternoon by helping archive the morning's paperwork, placing fresh tablets in rows on open shelves to dry. Some will be stacked and wrapped in reeds, labeled by date and topic. Others will be baked in the next temple fire session, depending on how urgent or flammable they are. As the sun dips, the elder claps you on the shoulder. He doesn't say good work, but his grunt sounds slightly more approving than usual. You take it. You walk home with the fading scent of incense clinging to your robe and the day's clay dust on your hands. Your path takes you past a small market where a vendor is selling what he swears are anti-curse bracelets made from dried beetles. You nod politely and decline. A boy runs past you carrying a broken tablet like a prized toy. Two women argue about the price of oil. A scribe from another temple gives you a look that might mean rivalry or just indigestion. It's hard to tell in Ur. You reach your door just as the sky turns from gold to ash. You sit on the steps, stretch your arms, and stare up at the first visible star. Another day of goat disputes and soot ghosts behind you. Tomorrow? Maybe something simple, like counting ducks. You're getting used to the rhythm of Ur, the predictable chaos, the half-burnt incense in your robe, the satisfying squish of clay under your sandals. But today, things shift. Today, you're summoned to attend your first full Council of Elders session. A meeting so formal it involves a change of robe and, apparently, snack rations. You arrive at the temple's great chamber, where the ziggurat's inner decisions are made. The room is tall and shadowy, with narrow windows filtering, in columns of hot light and dust. A circle of low stone benches surrounds a central pit filled with, well, you don't know what it's filled with. Ash, dignity, some kind of sacred gravel. You're escorted in by a junior priest who whispers, "Don't speak unless someone addresses you directly, and even then, try not to say anything." Comforting, the elders are already in place. 8 of them, each draped in what must be at least 2 extra layers of ceremonial linen. There's the elder of grain, the elder of construction, the elder of fish, you recognize him by smell, and several others whose titles seem intentionally vague. One is simply called Stern Presence. The high priest enters last, walking like someone who hasn't sat down since the last eclipse. He carries a staff, not for walking, purely theatrical. He taps it once and the meeting begins. Item 1, a proposal to expand the Eastern Canal. A temple scribe reads the labor and resource estimates aloud, something about bricks, beer rations, and 3 teams of oxen. You try to follow along, but quickly realize this is more performance than procedure. The elders argue not in simple terms, but with parables. One says, "The canal is like a serpent. It grows too long. It eats its tail." Another counters, "Yes, but if it does not grow, it dries and dies." A third simply says, "My cousin drowned in a canal," which, while valid, doesn't seem especially constructive. You're here to assist with minute taking, except there's no clear system of minutes. Just clay tablets and whispered summaries. The elder next to you hands over his tablet and mutters, "Right, general agreement, except for Fishman." You dutifully press the stylus, "Canal expansion, approved, conditional upon oxen and moon." Signs, that's another thing. The moon comes up, a lot. One elder keeps checking a wax tablet covered in lunar phases. He insists that certain days are cursed for digging. Others are perfect. Today? Acceptable if bread is fresh. Historians still debate how seriously omens were taken in these decisions. Some believe they were central to all major planning. Others suggest they were just a convenient way to delay paperwork. Either way, you're now halfway through a debate, about which celestial alignment most supports public fish storage. The quirky moment of the meeting comes when 2 elders get into a full-blown argument over barley distribution zones. One draws lines in the dust. The other erases them with his sandal. Eventually, the priest interrupts, citing a proverb. "A man who moves barley with his foot loses grain to the wind." Everyone nods, including you, even though you have no idea what it means. Lunch is passed around in the middle of the session, roasted onions wrapped in leaves, and flatbread so dry you could use it to sharpen a stylus. No one eats until the high priest takes the first bite. When he does, There's a collective sigh that echoes through the chamber. By afternoon, you're weary. Your back aches. Your brain is barley mush. But the elders are just hitting their stride. Now comes the trickiest topic: sacrificial scheduling. Yes, scheduling. Apparently, too many sheep were offered last week. Not enough ducks. One elder insists ducks are the more efficient offering. Less mess, more symbolism. Another elder, clearly in the sheep lobby, vehemently disagrees. A third suggests using pigeons, because they come in bulk. You scratch out notes as fast as you can. Sacrifice distribution chart pending. Pigeons unlikely, but not banned. And now, as if things weren't bizarre enough, someone mentions a dream. Not just any dream. A shared dream seen by two elders involving a flooded ziggurat, a floating fig, and a goat that speaks in riddles. That's it. The room falls silent. Dream omens outrank spreadsheets. You watch blinking slowly as the elders huddle to decipher what the dream means. Someone fetches the dream interpreter, who looks about 12 and smells like crushed berries. He declares, "The fig represents abundance. The goat, confusion. The ziggurat, obviously, is the ziggurat." Everyone nods solemnly. You're instructed to write "decision postponed, dream pending further dreams." You manage to keep a straight face. The council ends, somehow, with no bloodshed, only 3 veiled threats of divine retribution and 1 goat requisition form. The elders file out, muttering about canal angles and fig placements. You stand, legs numb, and stretch like a tired crane. The senior scribe thanks you with a grunt. Your notes are collected. You're free to go. Outside, the sun is low. The city is orange, its shadows long. You pass a street vendor selling post-council snacks, probably just old bread, but you buy one anyway. You earned it. As you chew, you reflect on the sheer absurdity of the day. Sacred gravel pits, dream-based policy, pigeon-based politics. It's all real, and somehow weirdly functional. Tomorrow, there will be more meetings, more sacred ducks, more moon-approved construction plans. But tonight, your only job is to rest and dream of fig-scented goats. The day begins with lint in your beard and sandal straps that simply refuse to behave. You wrestle them into submission, adjust your robe, which still smells faintly of roasted leek from yesterday's lunch, and make your way toward the ziggurat. The temple's massive silhouette blocks the rising sun like an ancient office tower, complete with early morning dread. Today, your supervisor meets you at the gate with a discerning sniff. "You're dressed wrong," he says flatly, squinting at your robe. "Today's a public inspection day. Full dress required." You stare at him. "You mean—" He nods solemnly. "Beard oil, coal, and that one linen sash with the zigzag border." You sigh, turn around, and trudge back home for your ceremonial gear. Sumerian dress codes weren't just for show, they were signals. Signals of class, rank, role, and occasionally, who not to talk to if you value your sanity. For today's special temple function, all scribes must wear their status visibly. So you oil your beard until it shines like a well-fed goat, apply dark kohl around your eyes, which instantly makes you look either wise or sleep-deprived, and find the zigzag sash that smells faintly of damp papyrus. Back at the temple, everything feels oddly theatrical. The courtyard has been swept clean. Incense is burning in 3 separate corners. Someone is singing a barley hymn with far too much enthusiasm. It's inspection day, when the public is allowed to enter the outer precincts of the temple, view the archives, and ask pointed questions about where their grain taxes are going. Your role? Look knowledgeable and hope no one asks about the missing onions from last week's ledger. You're stationed near a display of tribute tablets, records of goods received from nearby towns. A woman approaches, squints at the symbols, and asks if 4 ducks is a euphemism. You cough politely and say no, those were actual ducks. A boy, perhaps 8 years old, stares at your stylus and asks if it's a weapon. You tell him, only against disorganized inventory. He nods solemnly. Future bureaucrat. Nearby, a minor priest performs a mock reading of the stars, using a bronze plate and a lot of vague hand gestures. Venus suggests we prioritize fish, he intones. You're pretty sure Venus said no such thing, but who are you to argue with planetary interpretation? Now here's your quirky tidbit. Fashion in ancient Sumer wasn't just decorative, it was contractual. Certain robes, accessories, even sandals were worn to signal employment, marital status, and sometimes legal rights. Some tablets specify that scribes must wear a designated sash when officiating contracts, or else the agreement isn't binding. Imagine your job performance being tied to your belt pattern. The midday sun bakes the courtyard stones until the air shimmers. You sneak off for a break under a fig tree near the granary, adjusting your sash in hopes of catching a breeze. A fellow scribe plops down beside you with a dramatic groan and fans himself with a clay tablet. Remind me why we didn't become fishers, you shrug. Because we hate boats. Fair. Suddenly, a commotion near the temple gate draws your attention. A group of visiting merchants from Kish has arrived early for their appointment, and they're dressed very differently. Sleeveless robes, turbans instead of headbands. One wears a necklace that jingles like an anxious tambourine. Your call, summoned to greet them, since apparently someone decided you're now on outreach duty. You shuffle over, bow politely, and offer the formal greeting. The temple welcomes your feet and your goods, may neither smell too strongly. They laugh. Good sign. You're handed a gift tablet from their city, a record of trade intentions. Barley, copper, goats, always goats, and a mysterious entry simply marked entertainment items. You raise an eyebrow. The merchant grins. Drums, and possibly a bear. It depends on customs. You nod and escort them toward the scribe's hall, where you'll log their offerings and get them stamped, well, wedge-marked, by the trade overseer. Historians still argue whether temple inspections like this were genuine transparency or just ceremonial fluff. Some evidence points to real accountability. Periodic audits, public festivals with report readings, and even citizens petitioning the temple for better grain distribution. Other scholars say it was mostly for show. Today, you're inclined to believe it's a little of both. By late afternoon, the crowd thins. The inspection concludes with a brief blessing and some scattered applause. You're released from public duty and allowed to change back into your simpler robe, finally. You peel off the sash with relief and toss it over your stool like a defeated flag. Before you leave, your supervisor nods at you and says, "You wore the sash slightly crooked." You stare at him. He adds, "But your tablet annotations were excellent." High praise. You walk home, beard oil glinting in the fading light, sandal straps loosened in blessed rebellion. The coal still clings to your eyes, giving you the vaguely dramatic look of a wandering poet, or an exhausted bureaucrat, which is more accurate. A neighbor waves. A child points at your stylus. The fish vendor offers you a discounted squid. You politely decline and hurry home, ready to wash off the day and the sash alike. The sky over Ur is the color of warm ash, and the morning air is thick with the smell of wet clay and barley porridge. You're running a little late today, not disastrously so, just enough to warrant some speed waddling in your sandals and an accidental elbow to a market vendor's turnip pile. You mumble an apology, keep moving, and arrive at the temple with your robe slightly askew and your hair doing something it absolutely should not. Your supervisor is waiting by the archive, entrance with an expression carved from pure judgment. "You're late," he says, "and you're on fireproofing duty." You blink. "Fire? Proofing?" He hands you a woven basket containing a fresh stack of damp clay tablets. Records need to be dried and hardened. Don't mix up the urgent ones with the nonsense ones, or vice versa. Actually, don't mix anything at all. You nod, confused but compliant. The archives are tucked behind the main temple, stone-walled, cool, and eerily quiet, except for the occasional hiss of steam or a startled scribe dropping a tablet. It's here that the sacred, and deeply mundane, records of are stored. Grain lists, ration logs, love poems, irrigation complaints, all pressed in clay, all meticulously arranged. Today, your job is to prep the newest records for fireproof filing. The process is simple in theory. Take wet tablets, sort them by importance, and gently lay them near the fire pits until they're baked into permanence. The reality, however, is more like juggling bread loaves that yell back at you in cuneiform. You start with the urgent pile. There's a decree about canal repairs, a contract for goat wool delivery, and a rather detailed list of someone's fig inventory. You can't tell if it's for business or just a fig enthusiast. Either way, it's getting baked. The less urgent pile includes a poetic ode to a well, a riddle involving a donkey and a ladder, and one tablet simply labeled "The Problem with Ziggurats." You chuckle and set it aside gently. Whoever wrote that one had opinions. Historians still debate whether Sumerians intended their archive system to be as enduring as it turned out. Many baked tablets were probably just meant to last a few seasons. Yet millennia later, we still read their memos about goat deliveries and temple drama. You take each tablet, brush off stray bits of straw, and place them on drying racks by the fire. The heat is intense but controlled, like a very judgmental oven. A senior scribe checks the angle of each tablet, mutters, "Too close," moves 1/2 an inch, then mutters, "Acceptable." After a while, you fall into a rhythm. Lift, examine, arrange. One wedge at a time, becomes immortal. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some archive rooms included labels pressed directly into the wall, literal signage. Tablets were stacked in niches, grouped by topic. There were even returns sections, where scribes would temporarily store records being copied or referenced. Libraries before libraries. Midday arrives, and the air inside the archive smells like burnt dates and victory. You take your lunch outside under a fig tree near the kiln vent. Warm but breezy. You unwrap your barley cake, nibble on a salted onion, and watch a tiny lizard scamper across a pile of broken tablets. Probably a rejected poem or a tax record that included too many zeros. Just as you're finishing, a panicked apprentice rushes in with a dripping wet clay slab. "Emergency edit," he gasps. "This tablet says 40 oxen instead of 4. The last one broke. This is the only backup." You nearly drop your barley cake. Rushing back inside, you carefully read the new slab. Sure enough, the scribe wrote Shah 40 Gudu instead of Shah 4 Gudu. Big difference. You gently blot the clay, smooth the surface, and re-etch the correct number with a trembling stylus. One digit wrong, and the temple could accidentally requisition a stampede. As the day continues, your drying rack fills with solidified records. You tap a few to check their crispness. Too soon, and they crumble. Too late, and they crack. It's a delicate balance, like baking bread with consequences. You find one particularly elegant tablet near the bottom of the stack. It's a land deed, artfully written with evenly spaced wedges and even a stylized reed border. You admire it, then place it in the center of the fire array, like a crown jewel in a clay kingdom. By late afternoon, the senior scribe gives a rare nod of approval. Nothing exploded today. You may go. You walk slowly through the corridors, passing shelves full of drying knowledge, rows and rows of history hardened by fire, destined to outlast everything. Even your sandals. Outside, the air is cooler now. You stretch your back, shake clay dust from your robe, and head home with fingers still coated in the scent of smoke and damp dirt. You pause by the canal bridge, watching the water ripple beneath, the moon's early glow. Somewhere behind you, the archives glow faintly from within. Not just a storeroom, a memory vault, a fireproof filing cabinet of the human condition. And you, humble temple scribe, are its quiet custodian. You wake to the distinct sound of splashing, not rain, hasn't seen proper rain in weeks, but the enthusiastic sloshing of someone attempting to rinse a goat in a water trough. You peek through your doorway. Yep, goat bath. 2 buckets, one struggling kid, and a man yelling something about ritual cleanliness and fig theft. Business as usual. You roll your eyes, sling your satchel over your shoulder, and head off to another day of service at the ziggurat. Your sandals squish through the already softening street mud, which smells like an ancient smoothie of fish guts, dust, and regret. Today's assignment lands you in one of the lesser-known corners of temple life, the well-side courtyard. What passes for a Sumerian water cooler? Your official task is to transcribe oral petitions. People who can't write or won't come here to tell scribes their grievances, requests, or offerings. You listen, then immortalize their woes in clay. This sounds noble in theory, but most of what you hear is temple gossip and exaggerated fish theft stories. You settle onto a bench under a palm awning, stylus ready, and your first visitor is an elderly brewer named Lugal II, who claims that the priest of rain omens owes her 3 jars of beer and a public apology. She insists she has witnesses, 2 goats and a boy with 1 eye. You nod solemnly and write. Petitioner seeks beer restitution, claims divine injustice, request filed pending further goats. Next comes a potter who's furious that his new kiln was labeled lopsided by a jealous rival. He gestures wildly, nearly knocking over your tablet. His kiln is the one that's cursed. Mine hums like a sacred bull. You jot it down. Kiln dispute escalates. Possible ritual involvement. Recommends third-party inspection or dream consultation. You begin to understand that this courtyard, shaded, lively, slightly damp, is more than just a place to rest. It's where breathes, where scribes, merchants, priests, and fishwives cross paths and exchange not just words, but warnings, predictions, and recipes. The daily babble is a form of civic therapy. The quirky tidbit of the day comes from a young man who plops beside you with a sigh and says, "Last night I dreamed my cow recited multiplication tables. Does that mean she's a prophet or just lonely?" You stare at him. "I'm not qualified to answer that." He shrugs. Still seemed important. You file it mentally under dream reports, possibly literal. Historians still puzzle over just how much social life in Sumer centered around these shared public spaces. While ziggurats and markets dominate the archaeological record, evidence from graffiti, song lyrics, and scattered tablets suggests that wells and fountains were real hotspots, early bulletin boards of community life. Midway through the day, your favorite vendor passes by with a cart of sesame cakes and cold date mash. You trade a hastily etched note. To whomever finds this tablet, the sesame cakes were worth it, for a warm treat and a wink. You savor it slowly, watching a gaggle of temple apprentices argue over whether or not donkeys dream. Then someone mentions the gods. Specifically, a woman in a faded linen wrap insists that the god Enlil has been seen in the clouds, twice, once looking angry, once looking like a barley loaf. She believes this is a sign that barley taxes should be lowered. You ask her to clarify which cloud was angrier. She just winks and says, "Depends on the wind." You dutifully record her. Petition, but note. Request appears sincere, also possibly hungry. As the afternoon wanes, the courtyard grows rowdier. A drummer sets up near the well and begins tapping out a rhythm that's half lullaby, half weather chant. Children dance. An old man attempts to balance a jug on his head while quoting proverbs. A goat escapes a leash and becomes, for a moment, the center of attention. You find yourself smiling. There's something deeply human about this place. The mixture of the sacred and the silly. The orderly notes etched into clay and the unpredictable chaos of the day. Here, at the edge of the temple, history isn't just recorded. It breathes, sweats, laughs, and occasionally steps in goat poop. Before sunset, you gather your tablets, now a small pile of human moments, revenge requests, love declarations, prayer pledges, and at least one oddly specific complaint about sandal theft during eclipse ceremonies. You carry them carefully to the temporary holding shelves. On your way out, you pass the well once more. A girl leans over the edge, whispering a secret into the water. You don't ask what it was. You walk home slow, clay dust clinging to your hands and the faint scent of sesame still on your breath. The sun dips low, throwing the ziggurat into silhouette, its stairs catching the light like a divine staircase to the moon. Tomorrow, maybe you'll transcribe something serious. Or maybe another lopsided kiln case will come your way. Either way, your stylus is ready. You awaken today to the rhythmic thud of drum beats echoing across the rooftops. A slow, measured pulse that signals not war, not a festival, but something far more rare, a half-day. Yes, the lunar calendar has decreed that today is a favorable, a mission, a kind of divine scheduling anomaly where certain temple tasks are suspended in honor of a moon phase that's wobbly, or sideways, or possibly resembling a sacred turnip. No one seems entirely sure. You step out into the street with a grin, half-day, no barley audits, no goat tallies, no arguments about duck sacrifice quotas, just a few hours of scribing in the morning, and then freedom. But don't celebrate too soon. Your supervisor greets you at the temple gate with a tablet in hand and a stern brow. We're short-staffed. Moon said half-day, but the grain stores didn't. Of course. You're dispatched to the courtyard archive room to help verify monthly ration logs, essentially checking that every worker, from priest to porter, got their fair share of bread, beer, onions, and occasionally pickled fish. The room is packed. Scroll that. Clay stacked. You find a space at the edge of a long, low table and start flipping through last week's allocations. 2 loaves, 1 beer jug, half an onion. All sounds reasonable, until you hit an entry that reads 27 loaves, personal consumption, confirmed by Omen. You blink. That's either a typo or someone's got divine bread privileges. You flag it, write a polite correction, and move on. Midway through your review, the moon priest himself strolls in. He's a wiry man with star-shaped wrinkles around his eyes and sandals made of something unnervingly shiny. He mutters a greeting, peers at the tablet stack, and begins sorting through them while humming a hymn about potatoes. You're 80% sure Sumerians didn't have potatoes. This priest is here to confirm which workers may go home early based on the moon's expression. That's right, lunar HR. Historians still argue whether these celestial work breaks were genuine religious observances or just very early forms of unionized labor. Some tablets record elaborate star-based justifications for skipping entire days of canal work. Others sound suspiciously like, "I couldn't dig today. The moon glared at me." Here's your quirky tidbit. Certain Sumerian days were considered evil or unlucky for working. If you even touched your stylus on an evil day, it might spell doom, or at least a very bad beer ration. These were called taboo days, often aligned with eclipses, odd moon shapes, or suspicious goat behavior. The priest nods at you and gestures toward the window. Half shadow. Go rest. And like that, you're dismissed. You step out into a city vibrating with subtle joy. The streets are calmer. Shopkeepers linger. Fishermen hum while mending nets. And for once, the goats aren't yelling. You decide to do something completely indulgent. Walk. Just wander the alleys, Hands empty, tablet free. It feels luxurious. You pass a group of children sketching shapes into the dirt with little reeds, mock cuneiform lessons. One child solemnly announces, "This one says, I hate barley." You smile and nod gravely. A promising future scribe. Around the corner, you spot a shaded nook where two old men are arguing softly about celestial signs. One says the moon favors east winds. The other insists it's a sign of impending lizard plagues. Both agree that tomorrow is a good day for fish stew. You wander into a small courtyard you've never noticed before, filled with potted palms and humming bees. An old woman sits weaving something with date fiber, humming to herself in a language older than your job. She doesn't look up, but she does mutter, "Don't sit too close to the wall." It leans. You obey. Nearby, a young man is teaching a stray dog to fetch pebbles. The dog mostly just looks at him with disdain. You watch them for several minutes, enjoying the complete uselessness of the moment. Eventually, you find yourself by the canal. The water sparkles like a spilled pot of silver ink, lazily drifting between mud banks and crooked wooden docks. A few boats glide past, barges loaded with reeds, fish, even one with a basket of squawking birds. You sit on a stone and trail your fingers in the water, feeling the pulse of a very old world just continuing. You don't check your time. You don't even care what phase the moon is in anymore. This, you realize, is what a half day is for. A break from counting, from aligning wedge marks, from decoding fig-based metaphors and dream petitions. A quiet moment to be part of the city rather than its recorder. Eventually, the shadows grow longer. Bells sound from the ziggurat, a gentle chime calling scribes, back for the next day's prep. But not you, not yet. You take the long way home. And tonight, you dream not of barley, but of moon-shaped bread and fish that whisper secrets. There's a slight chill in the air this morning, unusual for You wrap your robe a little tighter, chalk it up to early spring, and try not to trip over the sleeping goat outside your door. It snorts awake, glares at you like you insulted its ancestor, and promptly relocates to a neighbor's step. Today's task seems simple on paper. Update the temple's health and absence logs. Every temple worker who's fallen ill, been cursed, or wandered off on a spirit quest needs to be accounted for. You'll need your calmest demeanor and your steadiest stylus. As you step into the scribe hall, you're handed a clay slate marked with today's patient roster. It's longer than expected. Your supervisor grunts, "Everyone's sick. Moon's in the wrong quadrant again." You begin your rounds by visiting the temple infirmary, which smells like herbs, hot bread, and possibly fear. A priestess greets you with a tired smile and waves you toward a curtained area where the patients are arranged like confused library books, some groaning, some napping, one reciting poetry to his bandaged foot. You approach the first bed. A barley porter lies dramatically splayed out, clutching his stomach. "I've been cursed," he whispers hoarsely. "By an onion." You nod solemnly, record. Suspected gastrointestinal curse, possible vegetable-based hex, administered mint, paste, and stern words. Next is a record keeper complaining of shoulder pain. "Too many ducks in one day," he says, flexing carefully. You resist the urge to laugh. Right, repetitive duck strain, assigned 2 days of rest and gentle chanting. The third patient is more serious, a scribe who's lost his voice after inhaling too much incense during a dream reading ceremony. He tries to communicate via gesture, eventually scribbling a note on palm bark that reads, "Still saw the goat. Still know the truth." You choose not to ask. Log it as mystic aphonia, possibly prophetic. Now comes the tricky part, distinguishing real illness from ritual avoidance. In Sumer, claiming spiritual interference was a legitimate reason to skip work, but not without risk. You visit one laborer whose possession by dust spirits seems suspiciously timed with a scheduled canal dredging. He blinks at you, then lets out a low moan. A priestess enters, flicks water in his direction, and mutters a prayer involving 4 syllables and a very aggressive hand gesture. The man sneezes. "Cured," she says flatly. Historians still argue. How much of Sumerian medicine was practical and how much was performance? Clay tablets describe real treatments, wound salves, poultices, diet changes. But just as many rely on rituals, exorcisms, and herbal spells with names like "go away," "evil fumes," and "the prayer of stomach peace." Here's your quirky tidbit. One recovered tablet lists a cure for too much sadness of the liver. The prescription? A lullaby, 2 onions, and a warm foot bath. Modern science is still catching up. By midday, you've logged 12 ailments, 6 suspected spirit cases, and 1 man who just wanted the afternoon off to watch ducks. You approve his leave. He promised you a feather. After lunch, lentils, and a very dry carrot, you visit the exorcist's chamber to update the official sick leave board. It's a long slab of fired clay with rows for each name, affliction, remedy, and projected return. You add new entries, smooth over old ones, and carve a note in the margin. Reminder, check for duplicate duck-related injuries. As you work, a younger apprentice sidles up. "Did you hear?" he whispers. "Someone brought in a snake bite. Case this morning." You raise an eyebrow. "She says it was divine punishment for skipping her barley duty." You nod, jot a mental note, and realize Temple HR in is a delicate mix of real symptoms, dream logic, and extremely imaginative excuses. By late afternoon, you're cross-checking incense inventory to ensure no one's faking symptoms just to sniff the sleep blend. You catch one man who's checked himself into the infirmary 3 times in a week, always after fish delivery day. You update his file. Possible pattern. Investigate fish-related allergies or avoidance. Your final patient is actually a goat. It was blessed wrong, someone says. Now it won't stop spinning in circles. You consider your options, then simply write, "Goat pending realignment." Assigned spiritual observation. You file the day's tablets, hands covered in clay dust and a faint scent of crushed fennel. You wash up at the courtyard well, listening as someone nearby sings a healing song in a language you don't know. The water is cool, the breeze kind. You walk home slower than usual, eyes heavy, mind full. In a world without modern medicine, where illness might be a message from a god or just bad lentils, every note you write feels like both diagnosis and spell. Tonight, as you drift to sleep, you dream of chanting onions and whispering goats, and in the distance, a duck. You wake to find your stylus missing. At first, it doesn't seem like a crisis. Maybe it rolled under your mat. Maybe you left it by the fire pit. Maybe, just maybe, the goat borrowed it, again. But as the realization sets in, you feel a quiet panic. That stylus wasn't just a writing tool, it was yours. A reed worn, smooth by months of clay, rubbed flat at the grip from the exact way your fingers curve when you're writing about sheep quantities. It had character. It had history. You rummage through your robe pockets, check the side of the storage jar, even look under the neighbor's drying laundry. Nothing. You grab a backup stylus, a stubby, too thick one that feels like writing, with a carrot, and head to the ziggurat, grumbling. Today's job? Inventorying temple supplies and issuing new styluses to apprentices. The irony is not lost on you. You enter the scribe storeroom, where rows of styluses lie in neat bundles, each tied with cord and sorted by thickness. One bundle is labeled Advanced Styluses, extra pointy. Another reads for beginners or punishment use. You shudder. Your task is to log outgoing supplies. Styluses, of course, but also tablets, blank slates, reed twine, seal stamps, and the occasional emergency robe. You set up at the long bench with a clean tablet, your replacement stylus clutched unconvincingly in hand, and begin making rows of marks that look like they're trying too hard. Midway through counting styluses, an apprentice enters and stammers, "Do you have ink?" You blink. "Ink?" He nods, hopeful. You sigh. "We don't use ink. This is clay." The apprentice looks crushed. "Oh, I thought maybe we advanced." You give him a new stylus, mark it in the log, and write, "Apprentice confused by technology. Promising curiosity." Quirky tidbit for today. Despite being one of the earliest literate civilizations, the Sumerians never developed ink. They pressed marks directly into soft clay, then baked or dried the tablets to preserve them. Writing was as much sculpture as script. You continue issuing supplies, 2 styluses to a fish ledger scribe, he mutters about slippery numbers, a dozen blank slates to a tax team, and a strange request from the sacrificial team for 1 blessed stylus, preferably bloodproof. You note that one carefully. Then comes the real challenge, issuing seals. Each temple worker has or borrows a seal, a small cylinder carved with unique symbols or patterns, rolled across wet clay to confirm identity or authority. Think of it as a signature meets passport meets personal logo. You open the seal drawer and find dozens of tiny, intricate cylinders, some with animals, others with stars, one with what appears to be an entire soap opera scene. You test a few on scrap clay. One leaves a lion fighting a scorpion. Another shows 2 men shaking hands over a goat. You're tempted to keep that one. You issue a new seal to a scribe named E2, who's just been promoted. He squints at the options and chooses the one with a spiral sun pattern. You nod in approval and record it. E2 assigned spiral sun seal. Warning, left-handed grip. Historians still debate how personalized these seals really were. Some scholars argue that individuals commissioned their own. Others suggest many were reused or borrowed, and only elites had true signature seals. In either case, losing a seal was like losing your job title, your wallet, and your ability to sign birthday cards, all in one. Later, while reorganizing the stylus drawer, you spot it. Your stylus, worn, smoothed, slightly bent from that one time. You sat on it during Duck Week. Hidden behind a jar labeled twine bits, may be useful. You cradle it with embarrassing tenderness. You write the next few lines with it, and the marks flow better. Like your hand has remembered how to talk. You finish your log, file the tablets, and write one last line on a fresh slate. Returned stylus to active duty. Mood improved 63%. As you leave the storeroom, you pass the intern again. He's using his stylus to scratch his back. You give him a look. He immediately switches hands. Outside, the light is golden. The air smells like wet stone and roasted barley. You slip your stylus back into your robe, right next to your emergency date snack. And tonight, as you fall asleep, you dream of smooth clay, crisp marks, and seals that leave just the right impression, literally. The road to the ziggurat this morning is dramatic. The overnight rain turned the streets of Ur into a slalom course of puddles, sunken carts, and mysteriously mobile chickens. Your sandals are soaked before you even make it past the lentil. Vendors stall. By the time you reach the temple gate, your robe clings to your calves and you've got half a palm leaf stuck to your heel. But no matter. Today, you're on transport log duty, tracking the daily comings and goings of temple staff, carts, deliveries, and the all-important goat traffic. You settle at your usual desk in the side hall, a stone bench with just enough slope to be a problem. Your first task? Reconcile yesterday's delivery records with this morning's foot traffic. First anomaly. A cart loaded with amphorae of date beer arrived 2 hours late because, according to the courier, a goose laid down in the road and refused to move. You write this down exactly as told. You've learned better than to editorialize. Second, the fishmongers are mad. Again. This time, because the temple's northern entrance was blocked by a mudslide, forcing them to circle the entire complex with baskets full of quickly warming eels. The guard on duty insists he warned them. They insist he was napping. You log both versions. Truth lies in eel-shaped ambiguity. Then you begin logging the most unpredictable entries of all, the pedestrians. People arrive at the temple with complaints, requests, dreams to interpret, debts to settle, and occasionally just to gossip about someone's cousin who was seen weeping beside the incense rack. Your log includes names, times, stated purpose, and notable footwear. Sandals with feathers, left foot missing strap, just in case. Around mid-morning, the intern bursts in, panting. "Traffic jam near the south wall," he gasps. "A herd of sheep blocked a procession, and someone tried to fix it by throwing bread." You blink. "Did it work?" He shrugs. "Depends on your definition of fixed." You mark it down. Procession delayed, bread weaponized, sheep unimpressed. Here's your quirky tidbit for today. While Sumerians didn't have street signs, some tablets reference known paths and routes with colorful names. One particularly narrow alley was called Place Where Donkeys Hesitate. Another tablet warns against shortcutting through the Street of Quick Sandals, which may or may not have involved petty theft or surprise geese. As the day warms, the mud only gets worse. You step outside to check the perimeter report, and your sandal is immediately claimed by the street. It makes a slow sucking sound as you retrieve it, earning a sympathetic nod from a passing merchant. You take a brief detour to the canal, where a delivery of temple firewood is being offloaded. A scribe nearby is angrily arguing with a boatman over whether 6 bundles includes kindling or just logs. The boatman spits into the river and says, "Ask the moon." You quietly mark the shipment as 6-ish. You return to the temple, just in time to meet a traveling courier who's been on the road from Uruk for 3 days. His tunic is torn, his scroll pouch is damp, and he insists on being paid in onions. You're not authorized to make that call, so you just write, "Courier irate, demands onion-based compensation, recommend diplomatic snacks." You take a break in the shade of a storeroom awning and nibble on a fig cake while watching the courtyard shift and ripple with people. A small boy is attempting to direct goat traffic using a stick and a very confident expression. It works for about 6 seconds before one goat just walks over the stick. The boy nods as if this was expected. You log the incident anyway. Goat. Logic defies human strategy. Back at your desk, you record the final tallies. Carts in, carts out, pedestrians by category, messengers, pilgrims, wanderers, flirtatious bystanders, and animal incidents. You press the final wedge into the tablet, satisfied. Then, with a soft grunt, your supervisor appears. He reads the tablet over your shoulder, pauses, and points to one line. "Did you really write stampede of ducks considered low risk?" You nod. "They stayed in the north corridor." He considers this. "Fair. By the time you're released, the roads are drying under the late sun. The puddles are shrinking, the carts are quieter, and even the goats seem to be walking in a slightly more cooperative line." You take the long route home, past the fish market, where someone's playing a bone flute and singing a song about slippery roads and honest sandals. You smile, and as you wash the mud from your feet, you think, tomorrow will bring more carts, more chaos, and definitely more goats. But tonight, you sleep mud-free. You're still brushing flecks of yesterday's temple mud off your robe when the call comes in, literally shouted from the courtyard gate by a breathless apprentice. "You're needed in records hall. Promotion audit." You blink. "Promotion? For who?" "For you," he pants. "They want to test your scroll skills. Tablet skills. Go!" Moments later, you're stumbling into the vaulted records hall, trying not to trip over your own robe hem. This is where the serious tablets live. The century-old tax archives, the original temple charter, even a poetry tablet so controversial it's kept under lock and barley seal. You've never worked here before. Your supervisor nods toward the audit table. Today, you'll assist with ziggurat-level reviews. Prove yourself useful and we'll discuss reassignment, possibly even elevation to Tier 3 scroll clearance. You didn't even know there were tiers. He hands you a fresh clay tablet, already half dry, and says, "Start with the temple labor summaries. Be precise. No poetic flourishes. This is promotion math. You sit, you breathe, you begin." First, up, labor records from the East Canal team. 45 workers, 6 missing, 2 reassigned, and 1 simply labeled swept away. You adjust the number, make a note to follow up, or send condolences, and move on to the ziggurat maintenance crew. They're fewer in number, but filled with drama. One tablet claims a worker chiseled his initials into the sacred stairwell. Another reports someone dropped a torch into the high priest's lunch alcove. You write, "Incidents reviewed. Recommend retraining and better torch holders." As you work, your stylus finds its rhythm, mark after mark, balanced and steady. Your fingers remember how to align the rows so they flow like water. The other scribes glance at your work. One even raises an eyebrow in a gesture that might be respect or indigestion. Historians still debate the criteria for advancement within the Sumerian scribal system. Some evidence suggests it was purely merit-based: accuracy, speed, clarity. Other records hint at social standing, religious favor, or the suspiciously frequent promotion of nephews. Your quirky tidbit for today: one tablet discovered near Uruk includes a glowing recommendation for a scribe named Patu, praised for perfect wedge spacing, minimal smudges, and reverence for ziggurat shadows. No one knows what that last one means. Midway through the morning, you're given a secondary task: update the records for temple-owned livestock. You pause. Livestock records are famously cursed with exaggeration. One farmer's 10 healthy. Goats usually turns out to be 4 goats, 2 with mange, 1 with attitude. You approach the task carefully. The temple's goat inventory reads like a bizarre novella. One goat is noted as exceptionally sacred. Another has a warning: will bite styluses. You mark them all down, even the oddly aggressive one, and suggest sacred status pending divine consultation. Recommend gloves. Then comes the scroll cart. A group of messengers rolls in a cart loaded with recent communiques, half from other temples, the rest from regional overseers. You're asked to summarize and log them. Most are standard: grain shipments, festival dates, a surprisingly long complaint about onion shortages. But one scroll catches your eye. It's a request from the temple at Eridu asking for a temporary loan of 5 trained scribes, including your name. Your supervisor glances over your shoulder, sees the request, and grunts. "Don't worry, we're not letting Eridu steal you. Yet." You try not to beam. You finish the scroll summaries with care, ending the last with a gentle reply pending. Recommend we send onion advice and stern thanks. As the afternoon light slants through the records hall's high windows, a hush falls over the scribes. The head archivist arrives. She's small, sharp-eyed, and walks with a cane that doubles as a measuring rod. She inspects your clay rows, runs a finger across the margins, then taps your final tablet. "Good balance," she says. "You don't dare breathe." "Line 8, she continues. "You wrote brick, where it should say support beam." She taps the wedge. "But I like your margin notes." She moves on. You exhale. Your supervisor leans in. "You've done well. Might be time for a seat at the main ledger desk. Less goats, more glory." You try to look humble. You fail. By evening, your fingers ache and your back feels like a poorly carved tablet, but you carry your work to the archive shelves with pride. Each one will be stored, perhaps even reviewed one day by someone else hoping to rise. Maybe someone like the intern, who is currently attempting to carry a stack of clay slates half his height. He wobbles. You grab the top tablet before it falls. "Thanks." He breathes. These are heavy, you nod, but worth their weight. On the way home, the air is cool and still. The stars blink into view above the ziggurat. You walk slower than usual, stylus in hand, wondering if someday your name might be on a seal or etched at the bottom of a particularly well-formed grain audit. Dream big, or at least dream balanced margins. Today starts with a sky so clear it feels ceremonial. You squint up at it as you walk, half expecting a god to write a note across the horizon. Dear scribes, good luck today. Love the moon. Because today is the quarterly review, a grand tradition where your work, your fate, and possibly your breakfast are all evaluated based on a combination of hard numbers, hard clay, and heavenly signs. It's performance review day, but Sumerian style. You arrive early, robe freshly dusted, stylus sharpened to a point so fine it could etch a proverb onto a pebble. You're directed to the upper courtyard, where a special viewing area has been arranged for the star readers and their scribal assistants. Your job today? Document the omens, with dignity, and a very steady hand. First comes the incense, then the chants, then the priests emerge, carrying polished bronze mirrors and thin wax tablets covered in stars and tiny dots. They speak quietly, reverently. You are told, record only what is revealed. Do not interpret. The stars do the speaking. You nod, though internally, you're already planning how to spell mildly concerned in cuneiform. The star priest climbs a viewing platform and begins calling out signs. Jupiter sits above the fig tree star. Venus moves west, trailing. Sorrow. You write it all down, even the parts that sound suspiciously like a weather forecast. Now here's the twist. Your quarterly review is not just based on how many tablets you filled or how few ducks you lost to miscounts. It also depends on the heavens. Your merit is written into the sky. Historians still argue whether astrology in Sumer was truly believed to influence promotions or simply used to justify decisions after the fact. Either way, there are dozens of tablets showing scribes being reassigned, rewarded, or warned based on celestial indicators. Today's reading? Moon in double curve. Scribes born in barley season favored. Styluses with west-facing tips will flourish. Those who count goats should tread carefully. You cough. You count goats. Often. You casually slide your goat. Audit under another pile. The quirky tidbit today, there's an actual surviving tablet in which a scribe's promotion is delayed because Mars appeared agitated. The stars didn't align. The scribe didn't advance. Mars was moody. That was that. After the omens are recorded, your supervisor reviews your work with one of the star priests. You're handed a tablet with your quarterly standing, a series of marks indicating categories: speed, neatness, goat compliance, ink purity, even though there is no ink, and celestial alignment. You rank acceptable plus, not bad. Not goat god level, but promising. Then comes the truly nerve-wracking part. You're led to a stone bench where the high scribe himself will read a summary of your last season's work aloud, in front of everyone, including the intern who is standing behind a tree and trying to look casual. The high scribe clears his throat. This scribe, he looks at your tablet, has demonstrated sufficient diligence in tablet care, stylus, handling, and narrative restraint. There was one unfortunate poetic interlude in a fish report, but it rhymed. Polite laughter. He continues. Clay margin spacing is stable, seal usage accurate, no major heretical doodles, performance aligned, with planetary projections. You exhale, then a surprise. A bronze token is handed to you. It's small, square, stamped with the temple's emblem, a stylized bull under a crescent. A sign, says the high scribe, that your work is seen. You've never held one before. You clutch it gently and bow. Not too deeply. You don't want to smudge your own standing. After the ceremony, the scribes disperse. Some smile at you. One offers you a bite of candied date. You nod, stunned, chewing sweetness and thinking, you are now officially, astrologically, Temple Certified Acceptable Plus. You spend the rest of the day updating ledgers with a renewed sense of calm. Even the goat logs feel less heavy. As you pass the archive wall, you pause to press your bronze token gently into the drying clay of today's delivery sheet. Just once. A tiny impression. A quiet signature. No one saw, but you'll know. You walk. Home under stars that no longer feel distant. They've spoken. You listened. And you're still here, stylus in hand, eyes on the heavens, and duck miscounts down to nearly 0. The stars may have smiled yesterday, but today begins with a divine hangover. You arrive at the temple to find the courtyard bustling, not with scribes or carts or ceremonial goats, but with people dressed entirely too nicely for a workday. Perfumed, polished, some holding tiny bouquets of herbs, others jingling with charms and dream tokens. You glance at the apprentice beside you. He shrugs. Date night or divination? Or both. You're swiftly handed your assignment. Help oversee post-work entertainment logs, which as it turns out is a very broad category. Today it includes beer songs, puppet plays, and one rather ambitious proposal to test a new board. Game called Who Stole the Sacred Fig? You follow a priestess to the entertainment sector, a stretch of shaded colonnade by the temple's southern wall, now ringed with cushions and amphorae. Someone is tuning a lyre. Someone else is tuning their voice with large sips of beer. Your job is to document the offerings of the day, who performs, who pays, and what dreams, omens, or marriages might result. First up, a traveling singer. He strums a lyre shaped like a turtle shell and sings a tune about a lonely barley farmer who falls in love with the moon. You record, ballad performed. Subject, lunar longing. Crowd reaction, swaying. Next, a dream interpreter sets up shop beneath. A fig tree. A line forms. You hover nearby, listening as one woman describes a vision of a fish with human arms serving tea. The interpreter blinks, nods, and declares, a sign of domestic blessings and an upcoming trade agreement. You dutifully note it. Here's your quirky tidbit. Sumerians placed enormous significance on dreams. Entire tablets are dedicated to dream omens with symbols like falling fig, Rurik's impending birth, or goat dance, hidden betrayal. Even snoring was sometimes interpreted as a sacred rumble. A young couple approaches the fig tree, nervous. They've been courting. In secret, sneaking glances over barley rations. Today they want a dream reading to determine compatibility. They hold hands awkwardly as the priestess interprets their shared dream. Something about 2 doves in a storm, nesting on a ziggurat. You log it as dream approved, marriage likely, request wedding calendar placement. As the sun warms the courtyard, things grow livelier. The beer flows, the singers multiply, and the fig-based snacks run dangerously low. A group of scribes starts a chant in call and response format, something between a hymn and a drinking game. You take a brief break under a linen canopy, sipping a cup of honeyed beer and watching the crowd mingle. The apprentice returns with a wide-eyed expression. I think someone just proposed a duel, with styluses. You sigh, grab your tablet, and go investigate. Fortunately, it's just metaphorical. 2 poets having a heated debate about whether ducks can represent existential longing. You record both interpretations. Poet 1. Ducks symbolize freedom. Poet 2. Ducks are just ducks. The light begins to soften, casting golden rays across the courtyard. A small group performs a puppet show featuring divine siblings who accidentally flood a village with goat milk. It's more popular than it has any right to be. The children howl with laughter. One of the elders chuckles into his barley cake. Historians still puzzle over the role of entertainment in Sumerian public life. While many temples included courtyards and stages, some argue that these events were as much ritual as recreation, meant to reinforce divine order through laughter, story, and the occasional duck-based metaphor. As twilight approaches, the dream reader stands one final time and raises a clay bowl. "Tonight's dreams will ripple," she announces. "Sleep deeply." The fig signs are good. You collect the last of your notes, musicians' names, dream entries, one marriage application written entirely in verse, and stack the clay tablets gently in the archive basket. As you walk home, the city is alive with quiet contentment. Lovers stroll arm in arm, fig-stuffed mouths whispering dreams. Children mimic goat puppets. Somewhere, a lone flute echoes over the canal. You take the long way home, stylus in your sash, heart oddly full. For all the tallies, all the audits, all the duck disputes, there's something sacred about joy, and sleep, and dreams of moons who fall in love with farmers. Tonight you will dream too. And maybe, just maybe, the goat won't interrupt. You're barely through your first bite of morning lentils when a junior priestess appears at your doorway, expression unreadable. "The high priestess wants to see you," she says, then adds, as if it's an afterthought, "Immediately." You blink, mouth still full, you chew faster. That's not a request you delay. 10 minutes later, you're standing in the sanctum wing of the ziggurat, surrounded by thick incense, hushed chants, and walls carved with scenes of divine debates. Gods, arguing over flood insurance from the look of it. The high priestess sits at a wide, low table, flanked by 2 assistants and several very serious-looking jars. She is draped in layered robes the color of burned gold, and her kohl is symmetrical in a way that feels intimidating. She gestures for you to sit. Then she holds up a cracked clay tablet and says, "Fix this." You lean in. It's a personnel tablet, your department no less. But the bottom third is missing. Water damage, the name of a certain acolyte is half erased, his role unclear. One column might say wheat steward, or it might say complaint recorder. Very different jobs. You glance up. "You want me to reconstruct this?" She nods. "And determine whether he insulted a deity or simply spoiled the lentils." You swallow. Your task today? Act as a kind of bureaucratic archaeologist, decoding damaged records, interpreting priestly intent, and possibly covering for someone who may have cursed the fig rations. You spend the morning poring over related tablets, weekly logs, kitchen rosters, sacrificial rotations. The name in question pops up again and again. He delivered onions. He stirred ceremonial porridge. He was definitely present during that incident with the goat. But did he curse the lentils? You find a record labeled Bean Disruption, 3rd day of moon curve. It's vague, but the suspect name is there, alongside the notation, Blame Uncertain. That's about as close as you're going to get. You return to the high priestess, tablet in hand. "My conclusion," you say carefully, "is that he was involved, but not spiritually responsible." She stares at you. Then, slowly, she nods. "Then we will demote, not banish." You exhale. She passes you another tablet. Oh no, this one is worse. Charred at one end, partially smeared. You make out phrases like unauthorized dream reading, barley rations falsified, and something that might be pigeon theft. It's going to be a long afternoon. Here's your quirky tidbit. In ancient Sumer, high priestesses were more than spiritual leaders. They held immense administrative power, overseeing temple workers, food distribution, ritual scheduling, and even intercity diplomacy. Some ruled like CEOs, others like oracles. Most did both before breakfast. You're granted access to the inner archive, rare. It smells like old roses and warm dust. You find matching ledgers, cross-reference entries, and finally piece together what happened. Someone misread a dream, redirected barley shipments, and a pigeon, possibly sacred, vanished. It's unclear whether this was incompetence or cosmic irony. You present your findings. The high priestess listens silently, then she chuckles. "It was the apprentice," she says. "I knew it." She hands you a new assignment. Draft a formal reprimand, 3 tiers of severity, to be etched and displayed in the public notice tablet near the temple well. You write with care. First infraction, misread dream. Correction suggested. Second, misdirected barley, re-education assigned. Third, pigeon suspected, clarity pending. May the gods with feathers judge accordingly. You submit the tablet. The high priestess reads it, then presses her seal, an elegant spiral flanked by reeds, into the corner. Before you leave, she says, you write like someone who's been cursed by goats and survived. You take it as a compliment. On your way back to the scribe hall, the intern rushes past you carrying a clay platter. "Do you know where to put the punishment pickles?" he yells. "You don't even ask. You settle at your desk, document the day's investigations, and log one note under personnel disputes, divine review. Recommend clarity on pigeon protocol." As the sun sinks low, casting amber shadows across the courtyard, you reflect on your strange new reality. You're no longer just a bean counter. You've become a trusted intermediary between the spiritual and the scribbled. You walk home through quiet streets, stars blooming above you like soft punctuation marks in a divine sentence. And when you dream tonight, may it not involve any birds at all. You arrive at the temple before dawn. Not because you're ambitious, though let's pretend that's true, but because today is audit day. The great annual temple audit. Capital letters and all. It happens once a year, and it involves exactly what you think. A terrifying pile of clay tablets, an army of over-caffeinated scribes, and a series of highly ceremonial head nods from senior officials pretending not to panic. You're issued a special stylus, slightly longer, engraved, not for aesthetic purposes, but for visibility. You'll be working under dim oil lamps in the back room where dreams of proper lighting go to die. Your assignment? Cross-verify grain offerings over the last 12 lunar cycles. Every donation, every distribution, every priestly snack, it all has to line up. The first discrepancy arrives within 10 minutes. A barley shipment recorded as 40 sacks in one ledger appears as 44 in another, and approx, many in a third. You sigh, grab your fig paste, and dig in. By mid-morning, you've logged 9 inconsistencies, 3 missing seals, and 1 incident where someone appears to have traded an entire goat in exchange for favorable dream timing. You raise a nice eyebrow, but mark it anyway. Unorthodox barter, divinely motivated. Historians still argue about the nature of these audits. Were they genuinely about transparency or just ceremonial theater to appease public suspicion and divine expectation? Probably both. You suspect the gods don't care about decimal points, but priests definitely do. The quirky tidbit today, a recovered audit tablet from Lagash includes a line where a scribe simply wrote, "Too much to count. Forgive me." It was stamped and approved. You dream of such mercy. Around midday, you're called into the summary chamber, an open-air platform where high-ranking officials gather to hear results. It's more performance than paperwork. Each department presents a symbolic offering representing their ledgers, a jar of preserved figs, a sealed record slab, and inexplicably, one elaborately carved duck figurine. The duck appears to be wearing a ceremonial robe. You're asked to present your findings. You step forward, tablet in hand, and read. Barley totals balanced within expected variance. 1 goat transaction pending clarification. No sign of missing moon taxes. The high scribe nods. Acceptable. Then comes the surprise. A priest from the House of Accounting stands and says, "The gods smile upon accurate scribes. This one shall receive the blessing of double rations." You blink. You've heard of this. It's mythical. 2 loaves, full onion, beer not watered. You bow, awkwardly. Everyone claps once. Scribes don't get applause. You nearly drop your stylus. Later, in the scribe lounge, yes, you have a lounge today, someone brought cushions, you savor your double rations while rereading your audit tablet. Your handwriting, for once, is crisp. The columns align, the margins sing. You share your onion with the intern. He tears up. You're a legend. You shrug, mouth full. Just good barley math. Back at your desk, you begin the post-audit ritual, sealing your ledgers. Each one gets a stamped impression of your name sign, the date, and, if you're feeling extra confident, a small doodle. You opt for a discreet spiral, conservative, dignified. Then comes the final act, placing the ledgers into the fire-hardened chamber for preservation. You walk them there yourself, escorted by a temple guard who looks like he's never blinked. You set your tablets on the shelf. They'll bake overnight. They'll last centuries, possibly millennia. You step out into the twilight air, feeling clean, like someone who faced a full-grain audit and emerged victorious. You walk home slowly, letting the cool breeze carry away, the scent of burning inkless ink and roasted fig, and tonight, you dream not of mistakes, or miscounts, or mysteriously vanishing ducks. Tonight, you dream of perfect columns and onions. You wake before sunrise with a sense of dread. Not existential dread, though that's always lurking, but something more practical. Your supervisor left you a message yesterday, etched into a half-baked tablet and placed ominously on your desk. Report to Canal Sector. Reassigned. You'd hoped it was a mistake, a prank, an omen misread, but no. Today you are officially no longer a temple scribe. You're a canal worker. Reassigned, they said, due to logistical balancing. You suspect it had something to do with that spirited margin doodle you added to last week's duck audit? You trudge through the still damp streets toward the Eastern Canal District, passing familiar faces, scribes, vendors, priests, none of whom meet your eye. They know. Everyone knows. The canal foreman greets you with a nod and a shovel. You stare at it. It's wooden, heavy, splintery. You hold it like a cursed object. Dredging starts now, he says, and so it begins. The mud is alive. Not metaphorically. It shifts under your feet like it's plotting something. Your job? Scoop, lift, dump, repeat, watch for frogs, try not to fall in, repeat again. By mid-morning, your arms ache, your sandals are ruined, your robe has taken on a permanent brown. Hui. A passing scribe sees you, pauses, then pretends to admire a nearby tree. You sigh. The day grinds on. You meet your canal team. There's Tunu, who claims to have once dated a star priest, Bira, who can identify fish by sound alone, and Sha'utu, who's been digging this canal since the flood before the famous flood. They're kind, loud, surprisingly philosophical. We move the water, but the water moves us, Bira says, spitting a fig seed. Also, don't step there. It's frog mating season. You nod, jotting the phrase down mentally. The frog part. Mostly. Here's your quirky tidbit. While scribes are immortalized in tablets, it's the canal workers who kept the cities alive. Without them, there's no irrigation, no crops, no barley beer. And their records? Fewer, messier, but just as vital. Some canal reports are etched right into bricks, reused later as foundations for ziggurats. By afternoon, you're sunburned, clay-coated, and have earned the grudging respect of the crew for not fainting during the frog incident. You're offered a seat on a dry reed mat and a cup of warm canal beer. It's not bad. Might even be better than the temple stuff. You lean back, muscles, screaming, and watch a flock of birds soar over the canal, casting flickering shadows on the muddy water. Then comes the runner, dusty, breathless. He holds a message tablet. He looks at you. They want you back, he says. Something about a barley ledger. No one else can read your shorthand. You blink. Immediately? You ask. He shrugs. They said bring your stylus, and don't be smug. You stand slowly, bones creaking like old scrolls. You thank your canal team. Bira throws a frog at you in farewell. You almost cry. By the time you reach the ziggurat gates, dusk is falling. The head scribe meets you with a grunt. You're late. I was in a canal. He hands you a fresh slate. Fix this, then we'll see about your desk. You sit, you write. It's like you never left. But you have. You're a little stronger now, a little wiser. And you'll never look at mud the same way again. Now, as the stars settle softly over the ancient city of Ur, the streets quiet, and the ziggurat casts long shadows across sleeping rooftops, you too can let yourself rest. The stylus is set down. The clay is cool. The records are written. Somewhere, frogs sing from the canals you helped clear. A goat snores near a barley sack. A priest whispers a closing prayer over a slowly fading incense coil. You lie back on your reed mat, full of lentils, pride, and maybe just a little leftover fig paste. The wind drifts in, warm and drowsy, carrying with it the soft rustle of date, palms and distant lullabies sung in forgotten syllables. All your ledgers are closed, all your errors forgiven, all your margins aligned. You did your part. You survived the audits, the goat-based scandals, the canal exile. You even learned to appreciate onion rations and sacred ducks. And tomorrow, when the sun rises over this cradle of civilization, the temple will still be there. The work will begin again, quiet, ancient, necessary. But for now, you rest. Let the stars hold your dreams. Let the gods tally your kindness instead of your goats. Let the soft murmur of the Euphrates carry you slowly, gently, to sleep.